want to say a couple of words or hello or?
Sorry I joined late. Glad to be here. I was able to get this tour a week ago, and I thought it was really important for everybody else to come here and see firsthand and let the city try and make their case and explain why they want to do what they want to do. So, thank you everybody for coming out.
So we're going to turn it back over to Miranda.
So we are very close to where the start of the San Antonio River begins, and across Hildebrand and onto the Incarnate Word campus, you have the Blue Hole and the headwaters of the San Antonio River. It flows down here under the bridge, then kind of comes back around here. And I'm going to talk about the three resources that are over in this area, which was the Upper Labor Acequia, and then we have the Upper Labor Dam and the Lily Pond. And so the Upper Labor Dam is where the guys are standing. It is buried in that area. It was buried sometime in the early to mid 1900s. We don't know why, but it was pretty much buried and forgotten. And so in 1995, there was a flood incident, and it exposed part of the dam. And so the city of San Antonio conducted an archaeological investigation, and hey, we have this amazing intact dam buried, right there that we didn't even realize we had. So anyway, to give kind of a backstory, the three resources, the pond, the acequia, and the dam, were part of an irrigation system that was built under Spanish colonial rule, and it was over 50 miles throughout San Antonio, and it provided water to the missions and to farmlands. And it was very important. Obviously, it was your water source. And so I have my notes here to make sure I don't forget anything. So anyway, the acequia system lasted for over 150 years. And then these three components were, is it not there yet? Oh, sorry. These three components were completed by 1778. This acequia is one of the very last acequias completed under Spanish, rule and construction. And so, anyway, so basically the water would come from the river, be diverted by the dam into the Lily Pond, which was like a retention pond. Then it would flow into the acequia and be regulated into the acequia by a head gate. And then once it was in the acequia, it would provide water for this acequia was mainly for farmlands that were located west of the river. And initially, this acequia ran from here through the zoo and all the way to the intersection of St. Mary's and 9th Street, which is when it went back into the river. So, anyway, so the water from this acequia was mainly used for the farmland parcels that were along the west side of the river, and so each person that owned a parcel would be responsible for that little bit of acequia that ran through their land. If there was an obstruction, they were responsible to unobstruct it. If there was damage, they were responsible for the repair, because as you know, water was everything. You had to keep it flowing no matter what. So in the mid-1860s, we had a big change to this area. We had in 1863, a Confederate States of America Army built a tannery in this area. It no longer exists, but we have seen where it was on historic maps. And so it also had a sawmill as part of a component to it. And that tannery was capable of producing 15,000 hides per year and 3,000 feet of lumber per day, which was pretty impressive. The Army made alterations to the dam in the acequia at this time. They raised the levels. So when we did the investigation on the dam, we discovered that there is a very clear delineation between the Spanish colonial era and then the Civil War era. So in the Spanish colonial, you have roughly hewn limestone blocks and cedar posts, And then in the upper part, you have Civil War era. It is like dressed limestone blocks. And so anyway, part of our project that we would like to do is expose the dam so that people can actually see this amazing resource that we have. It is very rare. It is not something that you just find, and especially along with the lily pond and the acequia. And so we would expose it. You would be able to walk around this area. We would recreate the lily pond where it would hold water, so you would see how that worked, and then you would see how the water flows into the acequia, and so the acequia will hold water too. We're going to do a restoration and repair of the acequia so that it will hold water, and so you'll get to see how water flowed historically through this area. And that is pretty much it. I think that if this project comes to fruition, that it will elevate this park at, we'd be at an international level. This is something you do not find in other places. We are very lucky to have it, and we need to be the best stewards possible for it. So, Jamal is going to talk about the trees.
Yeah, so in this area, for those of you interested in the heritage trees, there are several heritage trees that are staying. The two in this area that are coming out is, you can see the blue ribbon there. That is a heritage willow. It will have to come out because it is in proximity to the dam. So for us to do construction over there, in between the river and the lily pond, to expose the dam and to reconstruct areas where we need to reconstruct, that willow's got to come out. The other heritage is an oak that's right over here that is within a couple of feet. And
Where's the oak?
The oak is right over here. We can go take a look at it. We'll go point it out.
It's this one right here.
Yeah, you'll see a blue ribbon when you walk over there. That's in close proximity to the acequia. We've got to do repairs to the acequia again to make sure it holds water. Like Miranda said, there's also a lot of disrepair with the structure. We'll need to address that as well. So there will be, that oak will have to come out.
And then the whole parking area is going to be exposed to the sun, is that right?
The whole parking area?
Well, look at how the oak is over the parking area and how it blocks the hot sun.
Yeah, so we're...
But people walking here then will be exposed to the sun? I'm just asking for a clarification.
Exposed to the sun, yeah. I mean,
Okay,
if they're not in
thank you.
shade, they're in sun.
Thank you.
There will be other tree plantings as part of the project.
Right, that'll be great in 100 years.
I'm sorry?
That will be great in 100 years.
Okay.
That will be great.
Okay.
I think why everybody's here today, sir. I think it's great that you're giving us a little bit of the history. But I think the main concern is the trees. We do know. Looking at some of these trees, there are some trees that probably are old and damaged and dead, need to be repaired. But
Sure.
I think that ultimately these trees bring history to they've been here over a decade. And I think where a lot of our ancestors and our families and our children and our grandchildren are going to look about where did history start and
Right.
where does history begin?
Right.
And I think everybody's here today is saying we know that this park needs to be renovated. I think everybody's in agreement that it needs to be renovated, but I keep hearing that about the walls. There's got to be, if we don't have the civil engineers here in San Antonio that can fix these walls, then we need to go outside somewhere in San Antonio, because if there's something broken, we can fix it, and I agree with that. But what we don't agree is taking 200 trees down, because it doesn't make any sense. If you're going to take a $100,000 tree down, $100,000 tree down, and then replace it with a new tree, it doesn't make any sense, because that tree, like she said, we're not going to be around for 100 years, sir. And that's where I think that's where the concern is at.
And then what everybody
Yeah,
else has
I
to
agree
say.
with Dave. Let's hear what they have to
We've been
say,
here
and
6 hours.
then we can argue about it at the city level. It seems like.
Yeah,
today.
and we've got
This is the
numbers
city
of
level,
trees we
Wendell.
can share with you guys. The number of trees that are staying, the number of trees that are proposed to come out. It's not anywhere near 200, with all due respect.
105.
But okay, I'm not sure where that confusion came in, but we will fix that. We'll address those numbers. We'll give you the exact numbers. The exact numbers are out there now. They're on websites, but we'll share that information with all of you, okay?
While we're here though, right? So you have a historic,
Speak up a little, Bill.
you have a heritage tree right over there. It's staying. You have a heritage tree right there. It's staying.
That large oak right there by Hildebrand, that's a 50, I want to say 56-inch live oak. That's staying. That's not going anywhere.
These two trees over here are heritage trees. They're staying. Okay, and let's also talk about 100 years. So 100 years is when this was getting built too. So the walls are the same time, or right around the same time. So these trees are the same age as what they are. And then as we come down here, we want to look at this clump of dirt, which was a pecan tree, which is a heritage tree that fell down because of a storm event that we're going to mitigate for, right? But you know what it's pulling up? You see that stone sticking out of the bottom? That's part of the diversion dam that it impacted and is causing damage to, right? So there is proof of the impact of the tree on the historic structures. That is part of it right there. So let's head on down to the next area and talk about the waterworks channel and the pump house. What we're going to do is head back down the road a little bit the way we came. I'll meet you guys on the donkey bridge, right? I said the donkey bridge because it's a trail where they used to walk the donkeys
What
with
is your
kids.
name so we at least know who we're talking to? I'm sorry.
My name's Bill Fennell. I'm an assistant manager with the Parks and Recreation Department.
You had a quick question?
Quick question.
Okay.
I just would like if you would address, when you address each tree that you're going to remove, a little bit more of the rationale and what mitigation efforts there were that you thought of. Like, could you work around it? Is it a matter of money that's going to cost too much to work around it?
Okay.
Or is it a matter of that you absolutely physically can't?
That'd be great
to work?
clarification.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. So
And is it to move equipment? Is that the reason that you're taking it down?
yeah, so
That
with that
would just
willow
be
in
good to know.
particular, that is in very close proximity to the dam. Okay, so we have a very important historic structure, almost 200 years old. Okay, parts of it almost 200 years old, other parts of it over 100 years old, that we want to expose and repair. And in order to do that, we cannot do that kind of construction without severely impacting the root zone and root structure of that tree. Okay, you can see the condition that the tree is in now. Okay, it's not in the greatest condition. Okay, but in order to try to save that tree, there would be a lot of dam that we would not be able to uncover and interpret.
So you're saying
Ross,
the root
you had
zone has permeated the dam structure. You know that.
Yes.
Yes.
It's been.
Okay, that's the information we need.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
In addition, that tree is in decline. It is growing right now on top of a 30-inch concrete culvert that goes into the river. So we know that tree has not been here very long.
Will you identify yourself, please?
I'm sorry, Ross Hosea. I'm the Urban Forestry Manager for Parks and Recreation. Also a certified arborist.
Mr. Ross, I just have a quick question. How about the crown coverage? Like, can you talk a little bit more about that health and how, like, the viability of this tree already independent of any construction?
Yeah, I would put it in a state of maturity and somewhat in decline. It's starting to break apart. We've had multiple limb failures. It's got a very thin crown. It's got a heavy lean. In my professional opinion, it's a matter of time till the thing probably falls over anyway, just given its condition or its location right there on that bank. Okay, and we did look at that one. We looked at all the heritage trees to see the viability of physically relocating them. That one is one that we cannot, given the infrastructure that is built around. There's no way we could get it out.
None of them.
Correct. But I'll talk about each one individually if necessary.
Okay.
Okay. So
Thank you.
let's move on. Oh yeah, let's move over there and we'll talk about.
Probably want to do it from up top. You probably want to do it from up top.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, we can talk about that as well.
It's easier
Okay.
to go this way and then up around.
The acequia that comes from the lily pond starts right here and goes that way and then turns and goes under the road. So there is acequia within a few feet of this heritage oak right here. If you want to get closer and you want to look at the root structure, half of the root structure is already exposed and is working its way down towards the acequia. In order for us to address that acequia with any kind of structural components to strengthen it so that it doesn't fail in the future, that kind of construction, we cannot do that with this tree here. And I'll let, if Ross wants to talk any more about this tree, I'll let him do so.
Okay, so this is a removal. We did look at this for consideration. If it could be moved, it was our opinion it could not, given the slope, given the proximity to the wall. The wall would end up having to come out. We probably have, I don't know the condition of the root zone in here, especially underneath this concrete or underneath the asphalt. And then given the heavy lean, this would not be a good candidate for moving to be able to keep upright given its condition the way it is.
Trees, it's obvious that the tree is leaning to the right because of the weight of the limbs. So are you saying that by cutting some of these trees, at least trimming them off, you can't save the tree without taking a little bit of weight off of it? Because I would assume that if you take a little weight off this tree, you would be able to save it, even though it's leaning over. It's because of the weight of the limbs are so heavy that's creating that that distance and the weight to the right. So could we not trim it back to where we could save it?
It's more than the lean. The lean is just one factor. The other factor is the roots, the pattern of the roots and where the roots are going to be out in that wall. We're not going to be able to get enough viable root mass to be able to move this tree.
If you're going to take out the tree, can it be reused, like to make a bench in the park or something?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Some of these are, and we are looking at that on how we can repurpose some of this wood. We are looking at being able to reclaim some of this. We're working with our natural areas staff and ours. We have what we call natural playscapes, taking some of these pieces and trying to work them into some of those natural playscapes to the best we can. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, and for the project, that's the Parks Department's their plan for some of the material. For the actual project, we plan on grabbing 2 to 3 large pieces of the trees that are coming down and turning those into some sort of amenity that we can use and put into the project, like a bench, for instance. So yeah, we are looking at that. We're making sure that that becomes part of the project. We haven't chosen an artisan to do that yet. We'll get to that point a little bit later. We've got to figure out exactly, how much material or what size we can safely bring down and save and store for the construction project.
Sir,
okay.
I know this began in 2017. Can I ask one last question? The way this river has gone here, why have we the parks, they're responsible for keeping the upkeep, why have we let it deteriorate so much? Why like everything else in San Antonio, y'all keep up, why has this not been kept up?
Why has what not been kept? The river?
Well, I mean,
or
all this area, it looks neglected. So, I mean, now of course it's gotten so bad that now something's got to be done. But the question is that with the taxpayer money, why hasn't all of this been kept up?
Okay.
Maintenance.
So
the maintenance.
Right.
The maintenance.
Want to take that? And then we got to move.
Right now we're struggling to try to knock trees down, and we're trying to clear this out, and we do understand that some things have got to be done. But where has been the maintenance? Who's been overseeing this? Is a question.
So I'm going to tell you that we have a city budget, we have a parks budget, and I will tell you we do the best we can with all the resources and all the time and all the people that we have to maintain over 255 parks. So that's really the answer. Is we're doing our best to do all we can do with all the resources that we have.
Thank you, Chris.
But I mean that's the answer without I don't blame anybody. We're doing our best with what tools we have, and unfortunately, some things
Sir, we know that you're doing the best you can, and I'm not blaming you. But what I am saying is that the city's got a lot of money that they sure do spend on wasteful stuff. This here should have been taken a priority.
We didn't have the money to take care of the issues as the walls are failing. So I will tell you, we've been working on the walls and structures, and also about how we deal with them. So since I've been here at Parks, we've been trying to figure out how to make sure our staff understands about where trees are growing and what those impacts are. Some of these trees would have grown up probably a little bit before I got here to the city, and they shouldn't have been allowed to grow up. They should have been hacked off when they were a little sprout, okay? This is true. We're getting better about that. We are having better education with our staff to understand that. And you should hopefully see that as we're going through. But we can still get better. This is true. But like these walls have been failing. Back in 2013-14, we had a section over by the train depot, the train bridge, that fell, a 100-foot section. We had to rebuild that whole area, and that section alone I think we were there for about 8 months. I mean, dealing with the damming the river and fixing those components, but we didn't have the funds to be able to take care of it. And then, I mean, it fell. So then we had to rebuild it.
So,
And
another question. This tree is 8 feet from that wall structure, right?
yes,
And 8 feet's a pretty good distance.
8 feet is not a good distance.
Well, can you explain to us 2 questions? The structure itself is basically solid at this point, right? Can you explain to us 2 things? Why do you need to take out the soil in those 8 feet? And what efforts have you made to mitigate it so that you can protect the tree and rebuild the wall?
that's the issue. That's why we have to take it out, because we cannot protect the tree.
I'm asking you why, how.
Because the structure is not stable. Okay, the wall is failing. Whether you acknowledge it or not, we can show you the cracks, we can show you the leans, we can show you where the wall is not there. The tree roots.
I'm talking about right here. You've got 8 feet to work with. Explain to us why an engineer can't be brought in that can make this work.
An engineer has been brought in. The issue is I have to build another wall behind it. I have to support that wall with another wall. I have to dig out behind it, remove those tree roots, which basically 5 feet, probably, 3 to 5 feet, I'm removing roots on that side of the wall.
I'm saying, like, why do we need concrete walls? Why can't we explore other alternatives, like huge boulders?
Of the historic walls? The masonry historic walls?
Well, if they're failing, right, and we're gonna have to replace them anyways, why don't we
stabilize them?
Yeah,
restore them.
We don't replace them. We have to stabilize them and rehabilitate them.
When you describe the wall behind the other wall, that's just a temporary structure to rebuild.
Okay, yeah, so there's going to be a wall that goes behind them, kind of like a shadow wall, which is what we're calling it, which will stabilize the existing masonry walls, will tie into it to preserve those historic walls. This park is listed in the National Register. It's also a state antiquities landmark. It's also a City of San Antonio landmark, and all of these walls are a contributing feature to that. And so we have to follow regulations at a local, state, and federal level, and so we cannot just take walls down.
Well, I guess what makes me a little confused is that we're prioritizing concrete over nature.
Well,
like
it's not concrete. No. What we're prioritizing is the historically significant structures in the park.
Taking out the trees
I think what she's saying, what's the difference between historic, the tree, and the brick? Because the tree was probably here way before the brick was.
No, it was not.
No?
That is incorrect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
There's every one without the other.
Yeah. Yes. So when we build these structural components behind the walls to strengthen them, you will not see them. They will be under soil. They will be behind the walls. All you will see are the historically significant structures that you see today. But we have to give them those structural components so that they don't fail in the future. This is not something we want to come back and do in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 and 20 years. We want to give these structures a sustainable design so that we're all long gone before anybody has to address these. Otherwise, you're just continuing to spend public money, and that's just not being good stewards of public money. We want to make sure that your tax dollars are spent wisely and that we don't keep coming back to these issues over and over and over again in perpetuity. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, so just to kind of restate a little bit about what she's saying, the acequia and this dam section, they serve no purpose at this point in time other than being historical structures, correct? There's no water flowing through them. They're not bringing water to anyone. They're not damming up the river to help carry water anywhere. They're strictly historical structures. Prioritizing it now when, recent city leaders in the past haven't prioritized it, and removing, functional living things in order to restore something that doesn't have a function anymore, seems a little bit skewed.
It's the history of San Antonio. It's our history.
Yeah.
It's why City of San Antonio is set up here.
The river is why.
Yeah.
That's right.
And then, why do people settle? Because they can get to water.
Absolutely.
So this has allowed the water to go to the people's
that can also
properties.
be commemorated like with something
To
like with
allow
a
them to
plaque,
settle.
and leave what is there because I mean, even in that document, the excavator, I mean, the people who excavated the area talked about, I forget what they called it, something that's protecting the structures right now, which is why they're still standing, and which is the natural land that grew up around those structures, which is why they didn't completely crumble. And they talked about leaving those existing land structures the way they are to help protect and preserve what's there without removing anything else. That was their recommendation at the time.
Those structures are failing though. Our walls are failing. So if we leave them alone.
They're not structural walls.
And what recommendation is that?
That everything just be left as
No,
is.
when was that?
In 1999, that document stated.
Oh, unless we had the funds to stabilize it. I mean, we would leave it buried to protect it until we could actually.
If we wanted more to stabilize it than to kill all the trees, why don't we just put it up to a vote again? How many people in San Antonio want all these trees
Well, and
killed
at the
to
time
stabilize
too,
those walls?
nobody said we had to, I mean, you just asked for the variance to remove the heritage trees. You just asked for the variance in January to remove the heritage trees.
Right.
So when the 2017 bond didn't say anything about removing heritage trees, nobody told the people of San Antonio.
It didn't, because I was on that 2017 bond
Nobody
committee,
told the people of
and
San
they
Antonio.
never mentioned anything about removing trees.
We need to remove
never.
300
It's not in there.
trees.
I was on that bond committee.
Right.
Cultural features.
But you just asked for the variance.
So we got, we do have a tour. We have some opportunity to get to some other structures, to talk about some other things, look at some other areas. Let's move on to the next area, please, and then we can go through some questions.
Let people ask questions, sir. Let the questions be answered. Let them answer. Let them answer.
Please understand that staff can only answer one question at a time. Now, this young lady had her hand up for the longest. We'll take one more question and let's finish questions as we move along. We can keep the tour going and answer questions. Again, you had a question.
I'll ask at the next stop. So
Okay.
We can kind of get.
Can you just introduce yourself real quick?
My name is Rose Hill, and I am a president of Government Hill Alliance Neighborhood Association, and I do live in District 2.
Okay. And you mentioned that you were on the bond committee at the time?
Yes, I was on the bond committee, and I attended all the bond meetings, and I mostly was on sidewalks and streets, but I also attended the bond for the parks, and there was never no mention of the trees being removed there at the bond meetings.
Yeah.
Even when we finalized, and the bond meetings were held at the Red Enchilada Red Public Library downtown,
Okay.
where we all sat in a sort of kind of a round circle there, but never was it mentioned that the trees were going to be coming out. It wasn't just until recently they put in this request to come in on City Council on February the 16th to ask for the request to have the trees removed.
So it sounds like what would your recommendation be for the city today?
I would recommend that the city go back to the drawing board, give the community, as you see here today, an opportunity to come back and do a little bit more research, do a continuance, and let's go back to the drawing board and give the community an opportunity to have input.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
We're going to dig out in front of the pump house. We're going to put a pedestrian bridge. We're going to restore the arches where the water would flow and the pumps would be to pump the water up to the botanical gardens, which was the reservoir, which pressurized the water going to San Antonio. So we're going to keep on heading all the way up to the pump house. We'll talk about it more there. I just wanted you to see what a restoration or a rendering, an interpretation of what a restorated 1870s view shed would look like with the restored pump house and restored archways.
And are you going to show us all the trees that are coming out here?
On the south of town. So direct correlation to those. Yes, sir.
These look nice. Why can't we? How come you can't reuse?
Because those are actually structurally designed and engineered walls. So there's a difference, and they're only 20 years old. So
restore those walls.
There's no need to restore those. That we're trying to take back.
Let's go.
Thank you.
Hold on, the lady that wanted to ask the question, did you want to ask? There you are. Yes.
So we're leaving the 1776 time period, right? Now we're up at 100 years later, 1870s, and that's where, you know, they were having issues, flooding that was causing issues to the acequias to keep them functioning. So then the idea was to pump the water, and so then they established a system of waterworks channels and pump houses and reservoirs to be able to do that happen. This is pump house number 1. And then pump house number 2 is over by the golf course. And that pump house has already been restored and repaired. So this one's waiting its due course, right? What happens is, like I showed you on the other side, where you're standing right now, all this comes out. And remember, we were talking about the arches over there, that keystone that I pointed out as you guys were going by? That keystone's right there. So the rest of this building is underground, and it's in good shape. It's got some issues, obviously, because of some trees over here, and some structural issues. It's from 1870. We kind of expect that. So the idea is total restoration, stabilization, uncover all this, allow water to go back through this, put a pedestrian bridge, create an area. Once again, about the concrete, right? These are renderings. These are an opportunity to try to show how a spatial interaction happens. We are actually reducing the amount of impervious cover by what percentage, Jamal? Where are you at? A lot. Where's that number, Jamal?
Way back there.
Oh, he's still coming up. So as soon as he shows up, we'll get you that number. But all that asphalt over there comes out. That tree right there is one of the heritage trees that will have to come out in order.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me. Why? Why?
To take care of the historic work that we have to do there.
Oh, come on.
And then, obviously, these two trees that are coming out of the side of the building, they're not heritage trees, but they will be coming out. And then, as you go around the side, as we start to head that other way, we'll be able to look at some of the other heritage trees that are directly impacting the walls.
All right. So, I'm Roy Swears. I'm from River Road. I'm a former chair of the association there. I'm a former member of the Brackenridge Conservancy Advisory Board in 2010, 2011 when this project was conceived. And I've served on the River Oversight Committee during the construction of the museum reach and the design and construction on the southern reach. And so I care about the river a great deal, as we all do. That's why we're here. And the project you described here, this location, is exactly right. You know, uncovering this is in the master plan, taking this dirt out, removing this earthen bridge, and telling the story better of how water works in the raceway here.
Microphone. Sure. A lot of folks can't hear you.
Yeah, telling the story of how the water works in the raceway, how the water came through here to the pump house and gets pumped up to Mankey Park. All those are the right moves. The concern I have is when we were talking about this heritage tree, this oak tree, and this I think it's a black walnut, and I would challenge or want to hear more to the design reasoning and why we can't think of a creative way of creating this pedestrian bridge and maintaining those trees.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Can you take a vote on that?
This isn't a safety issue here. This isn't a declining tree issue here that we've heard is good reasons for removing a lot of these trees. Okay. This is to put something new here at the expense of trees is what I see right now. And I would challenge that there is an alternative here to consider perhaps.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
it's a new bridge to be able to tell a story that's here. The people who built this bridge had another story to tell. And we're choosing the people who built this bridge that we're standing on right now, we don't even know it's a bridge. Because the people who built this bridge wanted this space, they wanted cars to be able to go through here. That was important at the time when this was built. You know, Brackenridge has always been a park for cars and for driving around, and that's why this bridge is here. I would guess.
Okay.
So that was one story, and we're choosing to tell another story about the raceway and the pumpway and the pump house. And I think that's an important story to tell as well. And I'm not saying not to remove this bridge.
Right.
I'm not saying don't put a pedestrian bridge here. I'm just saying let's reconsider the design of that. Absolutely. That can accommodate these trees that are here now.
So we worked very hard on this. This was not easy. These were, you know, landscape architects, structural engineers, designers, historians, going through this process for the last, since 2017, just about, I guess about 2018, on how we're going to make this work. This was not an easy decision. I will tell you that. And, you know, we walked out of planning commission, and I'll tell you, our landscape architect on the job said, "This is weird. I've never been here before because this is not what we do. But I've never worked on a project that had the historical significance that this one has, right? This is not what Parks does. We do not go and tear down trees. We build them, we work around them. You know, we've got trails going all through our creekways, and we zigzag and go around trees and make all this stuff happen. So I will tell you, we worked very hard. We hear you, and I understand your passion about this. Listen to ours. We worked very hard to make this happen, and understanding also the bigger picture that we have to deal with. I have to deal with the Corps of Engineers, which are great, but they have restrictions and rules on what we can do. The Texas Historical Commission, you heard what Miranda said, and what we're required because of our designations, right? We have to work with them. There are issues if we do not, right? There's mitigation and other effects that impact that. So these are all things that we had to consider as we looked at each and every tree. And we walked this many a times to try to figure this out and see what we could do. So I hear you, but I want you to understand, we spent the time, we've spent the effort, we've worked very hard to try to make this happen, and this is the best plan we could make to take care of all the issues at hand.
The whole kind of working class character of Brackenridge Park, with the lowriders and the fisher people, and is doomed here. That what we're trying to do is spruce it up to make it attractive for the well-heeled. So I'm glad that you're committing today that it's not going to turn into cafes and shops and something that just sells the place out and ruins the character of it for the working class people. Second, this is, you know, deep in their heritages, you know, their Easter parties and their quinceañeras. I mean, this is the soul of working class San Antonio, as historic as any of those funky little aqueduct things over there. I'm a historian from St. Mary's University, Teresa Van Point, and I tell you what, every time this happens, people start distrusting historians. They say, no, we're not going to participate in your preservation. Like, the problem here that I see is that every time this happens and there's a bond for historical preservation, and I'm rallying people to vote for it, they say, no, because they don't tell you what's really going to happen. I'm not voting for it, Teresa, because we can't trust it. Last time they came to my house and wanted to make it historic, then I find out I can't paint it purple or whatever. And so now what the people are saying is, hey, nobody said we were killing 30 trees or 105 trees. And so I just want you to know that it destroys trust. So as long as trust is preserved and the working class character of this park, we're good. Like the low riders coming through and the whole thing. But if it turns into more space, like the Pearl or something, we're gonna be unhappy.
So let's talk about that. So we're saving 135 trees in this area.
And killing how many?
We're saving 135 trees in this area, and we're saving 30 heritage trees in this area. So, right. So those are also the other numbers.
You have stated that this is not. Yeah, sorry.
You might have to go.
That's fine. So yes, okay. So in documentation that the Parks and Rec have put out and other entities have put out, this is not, you're not restoring this to be a pump house. this is going to be turned into a conference center or something else. You're going to restore the structure of it, but it's not going to be the function of whenever it was originally built.
Correct.
So that's disingenuous to say you're restoring it to its historical. It's not. It's a building that is going to look like something that was there, but the function of it's going to be not a pump house. That's the first thing. The second thing about taking so long to come up with the plans, and I appreciate that, I understand that, but I mean, from 2017 to even now, technologies have changed. The Texas Historical Commission has worked with virtual reality companies to partially restore areas and then to overlay virtual reality such that people can come with their phones and look at what the place looked like when it was in its heyday without destroying, for example, beautiful trees, heritage trees like that.
It's about the wildlife. Like, I know like all the construction's gonna be going on. Last weekend I was here, somebody was banging like wood and scaring the ducks away. So what's the construction gonna mean to the wildlife during that time? Are they gonna be relocated?
So the question is, what about the wildlife and what about the birds, right, that are going to be impacted? So they are going to be relocated before the construction project begins. So we don't have any control over what they do. We're going to relocate them to a good location for them. That's also good for us. And then the birds will do what they do. So, you know, I want to say this, right? So during their migrating birds, they leave and they come back. So they do this all around, right? Different places. So what happens if there was a storm event or something, those trees came back, those trees fell down. When the birds came back, they just go to a different area. They go to a different tree. They go to different locations, right? That's how they live. They accommodate things. We have worked with U.S. Fish and Wildlife. We have worked with Texas Parks and Wildlife. We have USDA Wildlife Services under contract to help us to do the most humane, non-lethal way to move them to a new location that's also good for them. So we've worked like with all the experts on being able to get them, and I want to say this, birds belong in parks, and we want them and we work around them, but there's also health and safety issues with what they were doing here in the park. So we got one more shot.
Yeah, just because of their proximity to the walls and the construction.
Stop the chop! 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 You cannot defile it! Leave our trees alone! This is sacred! It is people!
The city of San Antonio is not going to tell you that this is a sacred Native American site.
It is a sacred Native American site. You will not be told that.
Hello?
You are
Everybody hear me?
desecrating a sacred river. Yanawana.
Again, my name is Jamal Moreno. I'm a project manager with the Public Works Department, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about this area of the river called Lambert Beach area. And a little bit of history about the Lambert Beach area for those of you who don't know. In the late teens and early 20s, the Parks Commissioner, Ray Lambert, decided that he wanted an area for a swimming hole for people to be able to come up from San Antonio. Back then, this was all wilderness. He wanted citizens to be able to come up, you know, in that time, early 20s, late teens, early 20s, people were just starting to get automobiles for their families and they were starting to cruise the park. He wanted a place where they could kind of not just cruise, but come and stay, swim during the spring and summer months. and I'm sure it was very, very hot back then. And so he created this water hole for them to come and do that. So what they did is they took the natural banks and natural bottom of the river. They actually created a concrete bottom that starts at the weir, which is right under the vehicular bridge over there, and it comes all the way around to a section. There was a wall that's not there anymore through the river, another weir wall, and they concreted this whole area and turned it basically into a swimming pool in the middle of the river. Okay. They also created these walls that we'll be talking about, retainage walls, and the steps that go down to a sidewalk below, so that people could actually access the river safely and swim. And of course, you can see some steps and whatnot on the other side as well. So again, that construction is coming on 100 years old right now, so it is considered historically significant from the state as well as. First of all, what needed to be repaired. There's some areas that have completely fallen down, and we have since, Parks Department has since captured those stones and are keeping them right now so that we can use them for the future construction. And we can take a look at some of those areas that have already failed. But there are some areas that are just in major disrepair, and it's hard to see them from where we're at now, but later if you want to go across the river and take a look across the river, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. There are several areas of large cracking and fissures where eventually, if we don't do anything, those walls will fail. They'll fall into the river, and then any trees or any material above them will eventually fail if nothing's done. So in dealing with the design, we went through several iterations of design to try to figure out, okay, what's the best way to do this so that, number one, it's sustainable, so that we don't have to come and do it again in another decade or so, and make sure that, like we were talking about with the acequia back then, make sure that whatever substructure we put in there, whatever structural components we design and build, that there's that they last for a long time and we don't have to do it again. So as you walk along the fence, the Parks Department has put a fence in here just to keep people safe from the edge and the failing walls. But as you walk along, you'll be able to see some of the trees that are in really, really close proximity to these walls. In fact, there's a couple of trees that are sitting on top of the walls, and there are these oaks that you see here that have grown from down below are basically sitting in between the walls, a small planter area between the walls above them and the walk below them. And so in order for us to do any kind of construction on those walls, those trees have to come out. And again, like Bill was saying earlier, we really took a hard look at this particular area and figured, okay, are there any trees that we can save? Does every single tree have to come out? Let's do our due diligence and try to minimize the tree removal. So we do have 2 heritage trees here that we are going to try to save. They are slated to stay. We're hoping that the construction impact to them and their root zone is minimal. And we're going to see what happens once our construction project is done. We'll do our best to make sure that they live and that they thrive, and we'll point those out. This is one of them right here. This is a heritage cypress that in proximity to the wall should probably go, but we are going to try to save it. Going to try to keep it and ask the contractor to work around the root zone. The root zone most likely goes all the way to the wall. And again, there's not a lot of room there. We've got heavy construction we have to do on the back of that wall, again, to make sure that it doesn't continue to fail. And we'll do our best to maintain that root structure and the viability of the tree. But that's the plan for this particular area. Oh yeah, this is another tree right here that is, you okay there? Okay, did it get you? Okay. This is another cypress that, of course, we're going to save. There were no proximity issues here, but it is within our project area, and so it will stay. Most of the other trees that you see are going. There is another heritage oak further much further down, closer to the pedestrian bridge, that we're going to try to save as well. It's actually up high on the bank. Some of the roots are exposed because of the erosion that's been happening, so we'll try to fix that during construction and do whatever we can to save that tree. But again, there are multiple trees in this area that are going to have to come out, primarily the ones that are in close proximity. So, yes, ma'am, you had a question?
Is there a way that we could reach out to maybe San Marcos, the city of San Marcos, or the city of New Braunfels that maybe has a little bit more experience in different ways of restoring the riverbank?
In restoring the river what? The river banks?
Yeah. We're relying on a wall to hold the riverbank. And in San Marcos, I'm not going to say they don't have any walls, but for the majority, it's like limestone or,
Okay. Well,
you know?
Again, the issue in us saving those walls is because they're historically significant to Brackenridge Park in the city of San Antonio. So, something you can vote on? Well, the local, state, and federal governments, all three of them tell us that they're significant. So, you know, we've got multiple governmental entities telling us that we cannot remove them. And if we do anything to the walls to repair them, that we've got to do that properly. We've got to do that under their guidelines. We have to do that under their codes. And there's a lot of design consideration went into that. We have to make sure that we follow their rules. We can't do whatever we want to these walls. That's just a fact. You know, if it were other walls that were built maybe, 10, 15, 20, maybe even 30 years ago, maybe those aren't designated as historically significant, and we could probably remove those walls and save as many trees as necessary. But this is a different situation here. These walls are coming on 100 years old, and they are designated as historically significant. We can't. I see where you're going.
She's got a good point.
She does have a good point.
What she's
You're
saying
right.
is that why can't we go outside San Antonio? If you're saying that these walls are historical, and why can't we get a second opinion from somebody out that has riverbanks that can give us a second opinion where we might be able to have save these trees, at the same time go back and fix those retaining walls so that you can't knock them down. But you're not listening. You keep trying to convince us, and I understand that y'all need to get these walls fixed, but you're also not listening to what they're saying. Why can't we go to have a second opinion? Why can't we go back to the drawing board? Why can't we bring all the community together and work with you guys on trying to fix this problem without destroying our trees?
Or contact the historic people that are saying that we can't.
And they're just simply trying to uphold the line that they're trying to follow. What we need to do is find the people that will provide, the outlet in the proper way, whether it be the mayor, whether it be our individual city councilmen. These people are all just working as a part of this project as what it is. So what they're essentially telling us is they're just sticking with the story that they're sticking with.
They can have their voices heard, sir. They want their voices heard. And today's the day. Today's that we need answers. People got questions. No, people got questions, and today they deserve answers. And all we're asking is that why can't we go back to the drawing board? Why can't we have a second opinion? That's all this lady's asking, and that's why we're here. It doesn't matter what the design is. It's the people that need to be heard. And today we want to be heard.
I don't have a question. I have a comment.
Ma'am, can we let
I'm
others
actually a certified planner, and so the one thing that we're talking about with historic designation, it's part of the National Environmental Policy Act that was enacted in 1969, and the whole purpose was to try and preserve historic structures, because at that time they were being torn down all over the country. And so anything that's over 50 years old is eligible to be a historically significant structure, but it has to go through a process. Okay, but so all I'm saying is you cannot take a vote. So all I'm saying is that you cannot take a vote. It's a process that goes through the Texas Historical Commission, and it goes all the way up to the federal government.
Yes, we can take a vote because the bond's coming up. You're wrong, ma'am. The bond's coming up. Okay, the bond is coming up.
I have a question. She has a question. Well, Brian and Ziggy had questions from the other side.
Okay, and this lady had a question as well.
So,
okay.
I did want to point out one thing which Mo was saying is we are working with THC. We are working, we go to HDRC next week. We are working with the Corps of Engineer on all the permits and everything we're going through. So we have been working with them, we'll continue to work with them, and we will get permits from them when we go to do this work.
We don't have HDRC permission yet, right?
I just said we're going to HDRC next week, and we will go back to HDRC regarding the design, right? So we're going to HDRC to talk about heritage trees along the river next week, and we will come back to HDRC when the design is final and approved by THC and the Corps of Engineers.
I think there were some questions here. We had.
Quick clarification on some of the migratory bird issues and things like that.
Yeah.
Has there been documentation of tracking those birds that we've previously moved from other locations and found that was actually successful, or are we going to end up repeating that same problem here? Do we actually have data of them tagged or anything like that, or are they actually tracked in that way?
Good question. So, question about example about dealing with wildlife. We actually dealt with egrets, and let's speak about egrets, right? Because that's the issue here at Elmendorf and Woodlawn Lake Park. But that was a totally different issue. It was based on impact and risk factor to our airmen and to the citizens around that area for that runway at Kelly Base. The number of birds flying across there was causing a significant risk factor to aviation crashes. So we worked with them, we allowed them to be able to come onto our property, and they successfully relocated the egrets out of Elmendorf and Woodlawn Lake Park. The team used, so that particular year they moved to an area on the southwest side of town, outside of 410, and they were tracked there. USDA used their team to track them. We didn't have an opportunity to go through U.S. Fish and Wildlife to be able to do actual trackers, so we actually tracked them on ground with vehicles and helicopters. So we were able to track where they were going and see where they went, and then they monitored them after that process, and the birds did very well. So obviously some of the birds came back to that same location the following year, but some of them didn't. So at that point we didn't track them, but that project was considered very successful. The risk factor for the runway was reduced down to almost nothing. It didn't go to can't go to zero, but it was reduced significantly. And actually, the island itself is still rebounding that habitat. And you know, it's interesting. We did get calls from citizens about the diversity of species of birds that we're having in the on the island and in the park now, compared to when it was just overrun by egrets. So
is it guaranteed that that process is going to be happening for this park with these birds that are being moved? Do we have
that is the exact process. We've hired USDA to help us with this process. We coordinated the plan through Texas Parks and Wildlife and through U.S. Fish and Wildlife, who's got the authority. So it's very similar to deal with the same issue, and that is, yes, we will be tracking them to see where they go.
Appreciate it.
And
so it is a bird eviction.
Okay, so let's go to this lady, and then this gentleman, and then the lady behind her, in that order.
Okay, I am a design professional. I have worked with SHPO, and I've worked on historic structures. And yes, you have to go to national and, you know, that kind of thing. But you also have, there is room to work with them, especially on something in this manner, which it's alive, it's alive and, you know, growing. It's a tree. I mean, most of the time it's historic, you know, it could be walls that are moved and all this other kind of stuff. But the ramification here is that we have 2,000 years that are lined up. And are we going to cut down 2,000 years over a wall that's only a few hundred years?
Right on.
So that's the kind of thing that has to be presented.
Save the trees! 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 Save the trees!